Beneath the moon the shadows creep, where whispers of the past still sleep. In this fairy house with timbers old, holding secrets that the night has told. Ghostly footsteps softly tread, where echoes of the lost are led. A witch's sigh, a slave who stays, trapped in time, forever free. In these haunted halls and rooms of stone, the past and present are not alone. The spirits linger, veiled in grace, within this haunted plantation's embrace. Ryder, host of Crypt Walkers.
Welcome to Crypt Walkers, the podcast where the eerie and enigmatic come to life. Hosted by a police officer, Ryder.
But there was definitely something in that house.
And his co-host, William.
Legitimacy first is more important.
Director of WTCW Paranormal.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another case episode of Crypt Walkers. My name is Ryder, and this is
Will with WTCW Paranormal.
And thank you so much for tuning in and joining us as we open the crypt and take a walk into the shadows of the unexplained. If you are new here, whether you're a skeptic or a true believer, prepare to open the gates and uncover stories of ghosts, cryptids, haunted places, and mysteries that defy all logic. The case we are covering tonight does have additional media, so what that means is that if you check us out on our socials, you can actually view images and extras associated with this case. It's a glance at our case file, if you will. We post additional media typically right at the time the case premieres, so if you're interested, check us out on Instagram at Cryptwalkers.
Absolutely. And this location just so happens to be one located directly in my base of operations, Virginia Beach, Virginia. We will be covering the Ferry Plantation house, also known as one of, if not the most haunted house in Virginia.
Yeah, and it definitely looks the part. So if you guys check out our artwork for the anywhere where you listen to podcasts, if you just look at the picture that where our logo is, that's the actual Ferry Plantation house. So it's definitely got a kind of a creepy vibe to it. And we'll obviously show more pictures on our Instagram and our TikTok and all our socials. So, before we begin, some housekeeping. So if you are new here, this is one of our first few episodes. So we're kind of at the beginning stages of our podcast, which means this is a unique opportunity for you guys, because right now we're trying to find our voice. So most podcasts go through a growing phase, and it really depends on what their listeners like or don't like. This is a good time that if you're listening to this show and you like this show, but you want to see some changes, or maybe you like some things that you don't, or whatever, feel free to comment and leave us a review, and so that way we can kind of adjust and grow.
Absolutely. We're
yeah.
not hard to find. You can just DM us on Instagram, TikTok, wherever you can find us. You can reach out to us and let us know what you think. You can tear us a new one. You can glaze us, whatever you want to do. It all works.
Yeah, I'm totally not looking at it all the time just to see how it all changes. Just kidding.
Totally.
So anyway, continuing on. I don't know if you want to share with us, William, but is it true that you went on an investigation recently?
I have. Absolutely.
Okay.
Which one are you referring to?
Which one? Man, you went on many? There was you said something about you were going to DC.
Oh, DC. No, it wasn't necessarily an investigation. I was just more so out of town to meet with some ghost hunting buddies. But I did have an investigation lately, if you can call it that.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a little bit of an experience where I had to build a haunted museum, I guess you could say, for a paranormal event. And that entails me keeping, I believe it was 5 supposedly haunted objects in my own bedroom while building the display for a period of upwards of 3 weeks. So that was definitely an interesting experience.
Oh my God, man. You're asking for it.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. I want to see some stuff go down. Of course, that's what I got to do as an investigator, right? Probe.
So, did anything weird happen during this, or?
So this is what I said to anyone who asked a question at the event, and this is probably the only thing I really noticed. There were a couple instances where people would walk into my room and they'd see them, they'd be like, "Ooh, that's creepy." But this one was a little bit more direct. I was staying at home and I woke up around 2 a.m. to music blaring downstairs. I live in the upstairs bedroom and we have an Alexa that's connected to a surround system. So if you ask Alexa to play something, it'll play all throughout the house and be loud as hell. Um, I woke up at about 2 a.m. to a song that I'm actually familiar with. I listen to, now and again. It was "Eyes Without a Face" by Billy Idol. It was playing on the Alexa, and I just figured that maybe my parents were downstairs getting lit. I don't know. So I walked downstairs to be like, all right, well, who's playing music at 2 o'clock in the morning? And there was no one downstairs. And in unison with me, my sister walked out of her room to look. My parents came out pissed because we woke everybody up, and we were all like, "Who did that?" And none of us did it. So that was definitely weird, because that would we checked, if you have an Alexa, you can check the queue of like inputs of like, somebody asked to play music, set a time or whatever. And we
Mhm.
looked and somebody asked Alexa to play that song at 2 o'clock in the morning, and apparently it was nobody. So that was definitely creepy. I think that was about like a week in to me keeping the objects. Uh, Pretty interesting, but beyond that, I didn't really experience anything else.
I must say, I don't think I've ever heard of that song before. I mean, I've definitely heard of Billy Idol, but um, that's a weird name for a song, especially a song to just play out of nowhere,
Yeah.
excuse me. It's tis the season, so my voice may sound a little bit different than normal.
'Tis the season for sinus problems.
I know, man. November. It's that November air. So, well,
Santa Claus.
I guess we'll go ahead and dive in, right? So
All right.
that's what you guys came to listen to. So we'll go ahead and start in now. As most of you guys know, I'm kind of a fan of history. So I'm going to do my best to keep this short, but the when you're dealing with a house, okay, that has so much history, there's going to be a lot of history, okay? I mean, I'm just saying. So, anyway, diving in. Ferry Plantation House, which is located in Virginia Beach, Virginia, is a historic house with a rich and varied history. Spanning several centuries, this house is notable for its ties to early colonial Virginia, its association with the development of the region, and its stories of hauntings and folklore. It spans literally across the decades. Here is an overview of its history. So, the Ferry Plantation House was originally built in the late 17th century. So, we're going to guess it's probably around the 1680s. I don't know, Will, you might be able to correct me on that, but
Yeah, it was. So the history is a little bit blurry because that's just kind of how things are when you're working this far back. And the location wasn't really one of too much significance. Like, you can track the history of something like the White House because of how important it was to America, but some random plantation back then, nobody cared. So they didn't keep an exact document of everything, but I believe the latest it can be traced, I think, was 1705, 1709, somewhere in that range.
okay.
Uh, that's at least from what I heard from my tour guide Cody Green. So
Well, we'll definitely get into Mr. Green a little bit later. But anyway, so uh, it was around the 1680s, and this was on land that was part of Norfolk County, which later became part of the city of Virginia Beach. Did I pronounce Norfolk right?
yeah, yeah, that's
Okay,
right.
good. So, Ferry Plantation first got its name in 1642 from a ferry boat service that ran the Lynn Haven. It's a waterway that served a vital route of commerce for the area. The Ferry Plantation was fairly large and was more than just a farm. At one time, it even had a courthouse on its property. The second Princess Anne Courthouse was built on the plantation's grounds near the present location of Old Donation Church. To put in perspective, it's a 1.5-mile walk from the current manor house to the church. This was the courthouse that had held part of the trial of Grace Sherwood, Virginia's only convicted witch that was tried by water and found guilty of witchcraft. Grace was jailed for some time in a now long gone timber courthouse. The trial took place on July 10th, 1706. At the time, the church that was used, which was built in 1692, it was called the Brick Church. Now, I don't know about you, William, but I kind of find this funny because it was a wooden courthouse, but
Yeah,
but
right.
it was called the Brick Church. Anyway, I know.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to get a little bit more into Grace Sherwood because I know quite a bit about her because she's one of the more popular figures in just Virginia paranormal culture, I guess you could say. Now, so here's a little bit more details into her actual trial. And the reason I want to get into it is because it was just so ridiculous. Like, it really gives perspective on how people were at that time. So I'm going to get into it. So this is the whole reason the trial started is
Mm-hmm.
because Grace and her husband, they all lived on a farm with 3 kids, right? So they all worked on a farm.
Mm-hmm.
And Grace's husband eventually died. And she was, coping and having a hard time. And when she started working out in the fields instead of being a housewife, because her, husband had passed, she would wear jeans out in the field. And then this is where all hell breaks loose, okay? Because back then it was believed that if you're a woman at that time, you're not supposed to show your shape. It's I guess taboo at that time, right? You're supposed to wear a dress or whatever. She's wearing jeans, so all the people from back then were riding by on their horse or their Model T, whatever, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is crazy!" So all the women's husbands in town were thirsting after her. This is the real story. So the wives of these husbands started going to the courthouse and lying about Grace Sherwood. Everyone tries to certain people think she was actually a witch. She was never a witch. There were rumors about it, but the rumors were stemming from women being jealous. So they would tell stories about she would come into their house in the form of a mare and ram into their bed, just really stupid, just complete lies. Okay, I'm just flat out complete lies. Eventually, the judge was like, "All right, I'm tired of dealing with everybody telling me this woman's a witch. We're going to give you a trial by water." Now, here's how a trial by water at that time worked, and it's pretty rigged, okay? So I'm going to get into it. So they took her out on a boat onto the Lynnhaven waterway and tied her to a chair. And they said, "We're going to throw you in the water. If you float, you're a witch. If you sink, you're not a witch. But here's the problem. If you're tied to a chair and sink to the bottom of a river, you're going to die.
Yo.
If everyone thinks you're a witch and you float, you're going to die. So you either die or you die." So they throw her in, she sinks. But since, she was working the farm handy, she happened to have a knife in her boot, cut herself free, swam to the top of the water, and she could tell it was about to rain. So she said, "Later tonight, it will rain." Obviously, it rained, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is horrible. Oh my God." So they tried to kill her again by basically saying, "You're going to go to jail." But it wasn't a real jail. It was actually just a hole dug under the church. And they threw her in here for 7 years. Nobody gave her food, water, or anything. And she actually managed to live. She lived her whole sentence. And this is where the witch rumors come from, because how do you live in a dirt hole under a church for 7 years and survive without food or water? Some people theorized she would eat rats. Some people thought she drank rainwater. But the most canon, I guess you could say, story is that she became a medicine woman and would sell herbs and teach people recipes from when she lived on a farm, and that those people in exchange for her services would go down there and give her food and water and stuff for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
That either that or her sons would come and give her water. But that's how she lived. So she lived her full 7-year sentence and died, I think, at the age of 81, which is pretty crazy for that time. Like, that's really old for that time. So, yeah, pretty
Holy,
crazy stuff.
holy crap. See, what I had, none of that tasty goodness. I mean, literally, none of it. Um, like literally, you read my mind because literally I was going to go right into Grace, and
But
like what I have, not even, not even doesn't even have all that good stuff.
yeah, well, it gets even crazier because she died. What happened was, since she was a convicted witch, quote unquote,
Hmm.
even though she served her full sentence, the state of Virginia repossessed her farmland. So her sons didn't have, anywhere to work and money, whatever.
Hmm.
And the state of Virginia, for the next 300 years, I think it was in the early 2000s, for the next 300 years, the state of Virginia had still been in possession of what was Grace Sherwood's land, right? But then this one woman who worked at the Ferry Plantation house, I don't remember her name. She
Uh-huh.
was a big time activist. I think she died a couple of years ago.
I can
But
tell you. I could tell you because I have it here.
yeah,
Belinda Nash, who is the Ferry
y-
Plantation founder,
right.
she
She
petitioned
went,
3 governors for over 20
yeah,
years.
yeah. She petitioned to have the land given back to Grace. So 300 years later, after Grace Sherwood is dead, she was rightfully given her land back, and they erected a statue of her outside of a Walgreens, which that's an interesting location. But yeah, so that's the whole story. Pretty interesting.
Well, and this is what interesting. So you say 300 years later. So listen to this. Okay. So uh, at Witch Duck Point on July 10th, 1706 at 10 a.m., Grace was tied, crossbound, dropped into the water above a man's depth. Okay. That was when the attempted trial, whatever, throw her in the
Yeah,
water was executed, was on that date at that time. Now,
right.
uh, on July 10th, 2006, at 10 a.m., 300 years to the day and time, Grace's good name was restored by Governor Timothy Kane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, pretty wild. And that's why there's a rumor that the way Witch Duck Road got its name was because they ducked the witch under the water.
Yeah.
That's people rumor theorize that. I don't know if it's true. It's probably
Well,
not, but
I couldn't help but notice that the church, okay, where uh so I in my notes, which are not as cool as William's story, by the way. So I'm not even. That's it. We have her story now. I'm not gonna go into my my spiel, but there is a part in here where I did put about the church. The
yeah,
place where the trial happened. It was later replaced by the old donation Episcopal Church that still stands on the location. It was that church was completed in 1736. Now, fast forward to now. Guess what road it's on?
Witch Duck Road.
Witch Duck Road. Yes, I can't say that 5 times fast, just saying. But anyway, so I mean it's a fascinating story nonetheless. I'm kind of curious if maybe there's a little something paranormal about that church, but we'll move on. We'll move on. So now back to the house. 18th century, changes in ownership and the Civil War era. The family plantation house passed through several different hands over the years, with various families taking residence. In 1828, the Walk Manor House, as it was known then, burned to the ground. It was not until 2 years later that George and Elizabeth Walk McIntosh built from the good bricks of the old manor house, the house that still stands on the plantation today. So that's the one that you would actually go visit today.
Right.
It
Well, that's
was.
why if you're on the inside of the building, you can see the house is almost sectioned off in different areas.
Mhm.
And that's because it went from being like a courthouse to a manor that blew up to what it is now. So just walking through, you can see there's like different sections to it. Like in the very middle of the house, there's like a hallway, I guess you could call it, that's
Mhm.
instead of forward, it's sideways. Like you walk from the kitchen and then through this hallway, which has 2 stairways on either end, and then you go into, I guess it's called the death room. Um,
The
which,
death
yeah,
room. Oh my
yeah,
God.
I can explain what that one is if you want me to later.
Well, let me get through the history and then we'll definitely dig into that. But holy crap, the death room. What the?
Yeah, I can explain. I can explain.
I didn't know we were doing anything about the Amityville currently. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and continue. Now, what you would do for most 17-year-olds when you're trying to give them a gift, you build them a house. Just saying.
Right,
So,
naturally.
so the plantation as it stands today was built for their 17-year-old son, Charles Fleming McIntosh. This is at the beginning of the Civil War. He and his family were against succession. However, as many young Virginians did when Virginia succeeded, Charles resigned his United States Navy's commission and was commissioned by the Confederate Navy to be captain of the CSS Louisiana. During the Civil War, the house, like many others in the South, was impacted by the conflict. The house itself did not suffer significant damage, but the region around Virginia Beach was occupied by Union troops during parts of the war. It was a slave plantation, and there are remnants of the slave quarters in the house today.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So after the war, the area around the house saw continued development and change. The plantation's agricultural roots began to diminish as the area transitioned towards a more urbanized society. Today, it is almost completely hidden in what would look like modern suburbia, with middle class homes surrounding its once spacious grounds.
Yes, yeah. The neighborhood that holds the Ferry Plantation House is very funny to drive through because it's a really nice neighborhood. You drive through, everything's super nice. It even has a golf course in the middle of there, which
Hmm.
that golf course has its own story. Oh my God, you're not going to believe. But you could drive through and you'd have no idea the Ferry Plantation House is there. To get to the Ferry Plantation House, there's like this little path tucked behind some random house, and you have to take it, and then you'll see it. It's right next to the water, like right next to it.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was gonna interject earlier, but I didn't want to cut off the history.
No, no, go
But
ahead.
an interesting, I guess, little crossover episode between the story of the Ferry Plantation House and somebody very important to history. A long time ago, there was a guy named Edward Teach, and he was known for being a very good you know, guy who was really good at driving boats. I'm not going to reveal who he is yet, but some people
Hmm.
might have already picked up on who he is. And he had to actually drive through the Lynnhaven Waterway and past what is now the Ferry Plantation House. Do you know who Edward Teach is?
I do not know who that is.
That's Blackbeard.
You're kidding me.
I'm serious. Hmm. Yeah, if you go through the tour of the Ferry Plantation House, they'll tell you about it.
You are kidding me. I didn't find
Uh,
anything on that.
well, a lot of the information, like the extra little tidbits, you have to actually go through the tour and they'll tell you and stuff. But they also have Thomas Jefferson's piano in there too. There's like
Do you see why this is important that, we had you on as a co-host
yeah,
because it makes it so much better.
yeah,
Especially
it's pretty
since
crazy. Yeah,
yeah,
Blackbeard did ride through there. Uh-huh.
man, oh my God. To finish it off, so now we bring it to the 20th century. Okay. So in the early 20th century, the house fell into decline, but it was eventually purchased and restored by a group of local preservationists in the somewhere around the 1970s. The Ferry Plantation is currently being renovated constantly by the Friends of the Ferry Plantation House, Inc. That's a
Yes.
501c3 organization, and it's in partnership with the city of Virginia Beach. The house is open to the public as a museum for tours and educational center, like William said before. The group recognized the house historical significance and worked very hard to maintain and protect the property from further deterioration. The Ferry Plantation House is also known for its hauntings and ghost stories.
Yeah, you guys, listen, the people who work at the Ferry Plantation House are so awesome. Like it does not pay to work there. I'm just gonna give a little insight. It does not pay at all. Like all of them have a full-time job, and they also do that just out of like the goodness or love for the history. So yeah, they're super awesome people who work there for sure. But yeah, so just to touch on what we were talking about earlier, because I don't want to leave it floating in the air. So let's talk a little about what the death room was, just because I'm sure after hearing it, you guys are probably a little bit curious. So it's a living room, and no, it's not a pun on it being a living room. The reason it's called the death room is because when it was the Wake Manor,
Mm-hmm.
back at that time, people didn't really understand how comas worked, which is why if you go through really old graveyards, there tend to be bells there because they, would go all the way down to the grave. So if somebody was just in a coma and they woke up, they ring the bell, and
Yeah, bell
gravekeeper would
ringer.
know that. Right? Yeah. So they didn't really understand how comas worked. So what would happen was if any of the soldiers or literally anybody that the family knew went into a coma and they didn't know if they were dead or not, what they would do is they'd, go into this big living room, set a table down in the middle, lay the person, the comatose or sometimes dead person, onto the table, surround them in aromatics, spices, flowers, whatever, because they tended to smell terribly because they were, maybe dead.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they would have a 3 day long party, 3 day long, super loud, bring the, people play instruments, everything, in an attempt to wake that person up. And, usually it didn't work because if they were dead, they're obviously not going to wake up. If they're in a coma, it's still not how that works. So that room has seen a whole lot of dead people, like a whole lot, just from random people drifting in there, laying on the table, the whole thing. That's why it's called the death room, because that's where they would hold those parties.
Oh my God. That's ugh. Like, yeah, no. No, no, no.
No,
No.
that
Oh,
also happens to be the room where if you just look up like Ferry Plantation House ghost photo, it'll probably be on our Instagram in picture form. Like I said, if we ever refer to an image, you can just follow along with us on the Instagram. But there's I wouldn't say famous, but it's probably the most popular evidence that's ever been captured at the Ferry Plantation House. But there's a picture somebody took of the window in the death room, and in the reflection of the window, you can see what seems to be a woman in a white dress hanging out by a piano. Um, and yeah, that's probably the most famous picture, and that one happens to be in the death room as well.
yeah, that would definitely be a really cool place to do an Estes method session. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's there's been so many investigators coming through there. They do overnight bookings where you can book a night if you're an
Uh-huh.
investigator or whatever, and they're booked all the way through like I think they've been booked like all of 2024. Like they, they're just always people going in there. Lots of evidence you can get in there.
Just to kind of briefly touch on some of the hauntings and stuff, because I know you'll go into way more detail because trust me, um, I've already I've already seen some of the stuff that you've done from YouTube, and it's anyway. I'll just finish it with this. In a USA Today article written in 2018 by Jennifer Franklin, it is stated the Ferry Plantation House is its undead ghosts include victims of an 1810 shipwreck, former painter in residence Thomas Williamson, a former lady of the house who fell down the stairs in the early 1800s, a former slave named Henry, and Sally Rebecca Walk, who mourns her Confederate soldier fiance. That's all I have. Normally, this is where I would dive into it a little bit more, but William, I think you will do the best at this one since you've actually been there.
Well, here's what I'll say about the documented ghosts of the Ferry Plantation House.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's been here's the thing about the Ferry Plantation House. Since it's changed hands so many times, there's just so many people that have died in there that if I were to name off everyone that died in there, it would take like an hour and a half. And it's just in an area that is a confirmed Indian burial ground. And if you actually go on a tour to the Ferry Plantation House, they have a baggie sitting in the death room full of like 70 spearheads that people just find around. And this actually
Talk about trigger objects.
right, and, they probably found out that it was an Indian burial ground in the worst way possible. A lot of places, especially Virginia, the way the burial grounds are identified is by, like, soft dirt or, somebody digs, whatever. Now, the way they discovered this neighborhood was an Indian burial ground is very unfortunate, so I can get into that. So, a couple years ago, the people who worked in the neighborhood were like, "We want a golf or we want a tennis court in our neighborhood." And this is why I was talking about the tennis court earlier. We want a
Mhm.
tennis court. So they dug out a tennis court. They dug out a hole in the ground that they were going to fill up with the concrete. And while they were digging, they started digging up skeletons of people. And that's
Oh,
how they found out. That's how
that's
they
some
found out.
poltergeist shit.
It gets worse. It gets worse. So they dig up like 3 bodies, if I remember correctly. And that's how they found out it was a burial ground. But it gets worse because you know what they did?
What?
They just poured the concrete over them anyway. So if you go to that tennis court, you're standing on skeletons. They just decided to pour the concrete over the skeletons anyway.
Oh my god. Holy crap.
If those native spirits are still around, I could imagine they probably didn't like that. I would
Well,
imagine.
well,
It's just
no.
that whole neighborhood has just an extremely unfortunate history, and it's no wonder that so many of people just in that area claim that they're haunted.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering about all the houses now that's like on top of that
Yeah.
shit.
Well, they're on top of an Indian burial ground, and they're also on land that used to be a plantation as well. So I couldn't imagine it getting much worse. Like somewhere to build a house. You know what I mean?
I could just
Um,
imagine the real estate, the realtor on that one.
Well, I know there's rumors. I can't confirm this for a fact, but I have heard that that neighborhood has a lot of turnover where people will just move in and then leave like constantly. But I've just heard that. I know a lot of people who do real estate,
So
and that's a
if you
thing.
ever if you ever get like a residential case right around
Mhm.
there, let us know.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure. I mean, I'm sure I will eventually. That neighborhood is.
yeah.
Oh man, people will just abandon their houses. Like I know a couple real estate agents where they talk about like because that's a really I guess relatively rich neighborhood.
Hmm.
Like I said, they said it was middle class, but in this economy, it's like all 2-story houses, so it's pretty rich.
Yeah.
Um, and I've like heard stories of people who they'll have like a 2-year lease on a house, and they'll just like leave 6 months deep and like break their lease.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I've heard some stuff about that neighborhood. For sure. Um, but yeah, so there's also more spirits that people talk about in the Ferry Plantation house. Like I know there's a ghost boy. I forgot his name. I think it's like, oh God, what is it? It's like,
There's another kid spirit.
yeah. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys heard my opinion on kids' spirits in one of the other episodes. I'm not a fan because they just so happen to be at every famously haunted location.
Yeah.
But whatever. So there's 2 kids spirits. One boy, which I don't remember his name. They're I think they're both like 5 years old.
Hmm.
But one boy fell out of the attic window and died, and that's a confirmed death. Now the actual him being a ghost part, I don't know if that's confirmed. I don't think there's any like exact encounters with him. And then there's another 5-year-old ghost. I think her name was Sarah, and I think she died. I don't remember. There's so many ghosts that people supposed to be at the Ferry Plantation house. The named and like highly recognized ones, there's 7 of them,
Hmm.
which is already a lot. You know what I mean? Like, for example, somewhere like Bobby Mackey's Music World, there's like one mostly recognized spirit, and it's Johanna. But Ferry Plantation House wants to have 7, so that's what they get. And yeah, the Cody Green, once again, I think he's the director and he's also like the lead tour guide. He does a lot of stuff. He also has his own paranormal team called Acid. I don't necessarily think they're active anymore. He's also like
Acid.
on the rate. Yeah, Acid.
That's
Acid Paranormal.
like an acid trip.
I don't
Oh,
know. It's just what it's called.
I mean, to each their own, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's Acid Paranormal. He also is like on the radio. He's just around. a lot. But anyway, he claims that when you walk into the Ferry Plantation house, sometimes he'll feel like a little ghost girl grab his hand and walk him through or whatever it may be. And apparently, with the tours, a lot of people say that they feel somebody grab their hand, something like that. So a lot of ghost things going on there. I'm not gonna claim that every ghost that people talk about seeing is a real encounter, but
Hmm.
supposedly there's a lot of active spirits for sure.
Yeah. Did I hit the right button? I hit the right button. Okay. All right. Guys, sorry to pause the episode, but I have something very, very, very important to ask of you. We want your stories. If you are new here, we have this thing called the Listener Files. It's an episode that we post. It airs in between each of our case episodes. So it's every other Wednesday. Okay? This is the place where your creepiest encounters, your most bizarre experiences, and your darkest creepy stories can be shared with the world. Have you ever had an unexplainable encounter with something not quite human, felt the cold breath of something unseen, or encountered a mystery that defies all logic? It's time to share your story. Share it with us. You don't have to read it on air or anything. I will go ahead and handle that for you. But it could be really anything, whether it's a brush with the supernatural, an eerie coincidence, or a moment of pure terror. We want to hear it all, even if it's not even true. Like, if it's just a campfire story. But just please, go ahead and tell us if it's, not based on a true story or anything. Look, the Listener Files is calling all storytellers. No matter how strange, no matter how spooky, I want to hear from you. I want to share your stories on air. So what are you waiting for? Okay? Just in the links below. Send us your story. Okay? Just do it. It'll be simple. It'll be easy. Okay. Now, back to the show. I gotta figure out what I'm gonna hit this button now. And I think we're gonna be back in 1, 2, 3. There we go. I mean, obviously, yes, we can actually watch this, but what was it like pulling up to that place for the first time? Like, what's the vibe
Right.
that you got?
So play by play for me.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, what I did was a regular tour of the museum. So I booked an overnight investigation and a tour simultaneously. My
Mm-hmm.
tour was, I think it was in late May of 2022, and my actual investigation was July 14th of 2022. So for the tour, that's when I got out a lot of the tidbits about Blackbeard and the death room and
Mm-hmm.
Henry the slave, and things like that. And the slaves' quarters, you were talking about how they're still upkept. One really sad thing about the Ferry Plantation house, the slaves' quarters are so old that you can't really go up there anymore. It's when you first walk in, you can go upstairs, and there's like a room with like a loom and some other stuff like slave tags and things from way back in that era.
Mm-hmm.
And then above that is the slave quarters. But how it is with these really old buildings, the higher up you go, the harder it is to maintain it. And the slaves' quarters happens to be like the highest point of the house, and you can't go any there. You can't go in there anymore because the floor is rotted. So that's a pretty sad
Could
thing,
you
Cameron.
imagine being in a freaking attic, a bunch of you, like
Oh God,
in the
yeah.
summer in
Well,
Virginia?
how do you think Henry felt? Henry, he was apparently like 7'1", and for that time, that's like being like, I mean, even now, Shaq is known as being huge, and he's not much taller than that. I
Yeah.
guess being 7'1", that's like freakishly tall, or like super freakishly tall. I don't even know how to put that, but that's really huge for that time. So imagine how he felt. He was actually around. Apparently, he was a slave for the Ferry Plantation House during the Civil War. So after the Emancipation Proclamation hit, he actually chose to stay at the Ferry Plantation House. Apparently, like he was freed, but he just, I guess, liked the owners and was rocking with it. So apparently, he never left.
Yeah.
From all accounts, all he did for the rest of his life was fish. in the Lynnhaven River, which is like 3 minutes from the house. And there's actually a pretty famous EVP from the Ferry Plantation house where he talks about how he likes to fish, which is
Really?
pretty interesting. There's a couple really famous ones. There's the one of Henry talking about how he likes to fish, and there's another one on this. There's a third story. So, like I said, the house, you can tell it used to be, something else because it's kind of split straight down the middle. If you look at
Hmm.
an actual picture of the house, which we'll post, there's a door in the middle, and that's kind of where the separation is. So the left side is like kind of what used to be the courthouse. The right side is what Walking Manor was. It's just kind of split up that way. And you can go into the third story. You go up the stairs. It's super narrow, claustrophobic. To the left, there's a nursery, and then to the right, there's a bedroom. That's where the Nana used to live.
Hmm.
And the Nana, I think there's an EVP of her talking about like her telling somebody to leave the room. It's really clear. It's like one of the craziest EVPs I've heard. I don't remember exactly what she said. It was something like, get out of my room past 9 p.m. It was like something really specific like that. Like her, like, yeah, I
If
would have to find the clip. It'll
if
probably
we
be
can
posted.
if we can find these
Yeah,
clips, we'll definitely link them.
yeah. I've
Because
heard the EVP though. It's been played for me. I was like, oh my god. Um, yeah, but I did my tour. I got my little tidbits from Cody, which was cool. And then on my actual investigation, I showed up, three of my childhood friends. I was just turning 16, so we were all kind of like messing around a lot. It wasn't too serious. Especially like even later on in the investigation when a lot of stuff started happening, they were still kind of goofing around.
yeah,
Um,
and I've
but
definitely seen that in the video.
yeah, we were having a hard time keeping our composure, but just like play by play of all the best evidence. I got I was in the room below the slaves' quarters, and there was banging on the walls, and I was using dowsing rods, because the reason I did that is at the very beginning of our investigation, I made everyone do a solo, which for those who are not in the ghost hunting world, is pretty much when everyone hangs out outside the building, and then you send one person in at a time to go walk around, it kind of eliminates some of the noise, kind of helps you hear things a little bit better, etc.
So,
So
for people that might not know, what is a dowsing rod?
a dowsing rod, it's not something I use often. The one I was using in the video, I actually got out of the gift shop in the museum just because it was there, and I was like, "Ooh, that's cool." But it's pretty much a metal rod in the shape of an L,
Hmm.
and on the shorter part of it, there's like it'll like be like a little piece of plastic, almost like a tiny little PVC pipe,
Hmm.
and it'll help the dowsing rods rotate pretty freely, like very loosely, and you pretty much you hold them to your sides, parallel with each other, and if it crosses like an X, it's a yes. If they swing out to a 180-degree angle, it'll be no, and
Hmm.
you just ask questions that way. It's a very pseudo sciencey piece of equipment because they just can rotate so freely, and you're holding them with your shaky human hands, so things happen with them. But that's what I was using. And when we first started, we went on solos, and I went through my solo. Not much happened until I got to the room below the slaves' quarters, where there is a letter H engraved in the door frame leading up to the slaves' quarters that was discovered to be carved in by Henry. And I had a laser temperature reader, scanned it, and it came out to 66.6 degrees. And if you watch the video, I kind of just laughed to myself, like, ho ho, 666, right? Very cliche. And as I said that, my flashlight I was using started flickering. And I don't mean in the sense it wasn't a mag light, right? You can see ghost hunters use the mag lights, they'll
Hmm.
twist them and it'll like be funny. It was a regular push flashlight, like a hiker's flashlight,
Hmm.
and it started flickering. And I don't mean just straight on and off. It was dimming in and out in a way that I couldn't have done artificially, with the button. And it started flickering in and out, and I laughed 666. Flashlight starts flickering, and I was like, "Oh shit!" That started freaking me. That was probably one of the craziest things I've seen, like ghost hunting. And
I'm kind of curious. What did it flicker like 3 times or?
no, it flickered like for the next like minute straight. And you can
Okay.
watch the video. I literally walked downstairs across the house to my friend who was in the death room, and the whole time I was walking, it was flickering the whole time. And I walked over, I was like, "Hey, can I have your flashlight? Mine's going off." You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So yeah, it was not like a 2, 3 times. It was like going. And in retrospect, now I still have that flashlight. I like to keep little relics for fun, just to
Hmm.
remind myself, and it still doesn't work. Like it's just that moment just completely busted it up. And I've changed the batteries. I've done everything. I've freaking banged it against my hand. It just is completely screwed after that. And I had never had any problems with it prior.
Now, do you think that was Henry?
I don't know who it was really. Like I said, with the ghost hunting thing, I always kind of it raises the red flags almost immediately for me when people start lifting off a specific spirit when they
Hmm.
have an encounter, because it's like, how do you know? You know what I
That's
mean?
true. Yeah.
Like you're ghost hunting, and you know you're doing a house call, and you know 5 people have died at the house, and you know who they are, and you're in the kitchen and somebody lobs a plate at your head. How are you going to be like, oh, that was Emily, I know it? It's like, how do you know? You have shards of glass in your hair now. What are you talking about? You know which ghost it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how do you know that? I don't know who it was, but it started flickering like crazy, and I was like, wow, that's wild.
Now,
So
do you guys, I say to you guys, but do you think that maybe you guys were so new at this that maybe there was something more that could have been investigated? You just didn't have the skills at
well
that
there
time, or?
Well, there wasn't well, I was definitely new to it, so I didn't necessarily know any
Hmm.
of the ghost hunting, I guess, techniques you could say. I
Hmm.
was kind of just like winging it. But simultaneously, it's like that's really all you can do. Like, here's the thing about ghost hunting or like just having paranormal experiences in general. The best piece of ghost hunting equipment you have is your 5 senses. So you
Yeah.
see something weird, you hear something weird, you know, you feel someone touch you. That's always going to be crazier or more interesting than seeing an EMF reader without fail. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was kind of winging it, and I didn't have a lot of knowledge, but just seeing that stuff, I think that's good enough for me. You know, seeing it with my own 2 eyes. And you know, I tried troubleshooting the flashlight after having that happen. You know what I mean? Tried to change the batteries. I brought some with me. It didn't fix. It was just ruined forever after that. Okay. So, you know, me and my other investigators, we showed up, we were there. We started with our solos, and I had that experience in, you know, the slaves quarters with the 666 and the flashlight going off, and, you know, and that was pretty crazy. And immediately following that section of the investigation, after we finished our solos, we decided to go into the death room for a bit of a it's not a spirit box, it's called like a ghost radio. It's almost like it's like an ovulus. It you know takes different frequencies, and it pops out a word. It's a phonetic voice box, I guess you would say.
Now, wait.
And I
You,
was,
you said that was the spirit box, or I'm sorry, I may
or
have missed that.
no, I guess I could say it was an ovulus session, really,
Okay.
or I
Okay.
used.
Look, I'm not saying that there isn't any truth to an obelisk because
No, I don't.
I've had some weird stuff happen with an obelisk, but I always love it when other stuff kind of goes hand in hand. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
go ahead.
well, I mean, you know my approach to investigating. I don't really take spirit boxes or ovuluses or things that can't be like. You go to the website of something like an Alice box, which is a very famous phonetic voice box, and you try to
Hmm.
look into the actual, you know, the actual like things they use, the components they use to build it, and how it works theoretically. They will go to impressive lengths to not tell you how it works. Like as vague as possible, just they'll try everything to not tell you exactly how the
Hmm.
device works. So I'm naturally very suspicious. But you're right to the extent that I didn't have as much experience, so I was just kind of, you know, doing whatever.
I
So we went in
mean,
there
yeah.
for
Go ahead.
we went in for a bit of an ovulus session in the death room, to which we had a couple question responses, which were very interesting. To begin with, I asked, you know, where are you right now? Is anybody here? And it said hidden. And, you know, me and my team took a note of that. And we asked almost immediately following that, we said, "Well, what are you doing? Why are you hidden?" And it said watching or looking. It said looking, really.
Oh no, no,
Um,
no, no, no.
so then fast forward a couple minutes and we asked it and we said, "Well, where are you from?" Kind of probing like the questions of like, do you have a significance to the history of the house? Are you, a ghost? What's going on? So I said, "Where are you from?" And it just said hell. And that's what it said. And I was like, well, that's weird. And you can see in the video, I kind of backed up. I was like, well, that's creepy. And we just ended the session. We're like, all right, that's enough from you. I don't want to talk to you anymore.
But see, that's where I think there might be a little something there, because was this before or after you got the 666?
That was after. That was right after we did our solos.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And you're
Well,
in the death room. You're in the death room.
right.
Like, what?
Well, we had the Ovilus sitting in the spot where they used to put the bodies, which is the center of the room. There's like a table there now. So that's where
Mm-mm.
it was. So then following that, we took a bit of a break because we had been just kind of investigating for like 4 hours by that point. We were
Mm-hmm.
tired. So, I'm sitting in me, Tate, and Chris were sitting in the dining room of the house, and I'm charging my phone because I was using my phone to film. And William Bateman was like, "All right, I'm tired. I'm taking a nap." I was like, "You really have the balls to take a nap in this house?" And he was like, "I'm gonna take a nap on the couch in the death room," which if you watch the video, there's this nice couch to the very left of the room. And here's the thing about William Bateman, especially when we first started out, he didn't believe in ghosts, not even a lick. Now by the time he headed out, he definitely believed, but at that time he didn't believe at all. So he didn't care. Like, yeah, I'll take a nap. I don't care. So he's asleep in the death room, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the kitchen, or I guess what was the dining room. And I'm charging my phone, and I was talking to Cody Green, and he was talking about how this was literally in tandem, like consecutively. He was talking about how a lot of the time when people investigate this place, equipment tends to go faulty, like
Mm-hmm.
just because I was telling him about my flashlight. He was talking about, yeah, equipment can kind of go faulty that way a lot of the time. And as he said that, my phone, which I was using, was charging. I think it was at about like 70% by that point, and it just died. Like it just completely cut off while he was saying that. Swear to God, I didn't record this part because it was literally impossible because I was
It was
charging
on
my
your, yeah, it was
phone.
on your phone.
But if you ask Tate or Chris, where they are now, they would back me up. It was literally like it just cut off, like as he was saying that from 70. And I was like, that's weird. Maybe it just, powered off. Maybe I misclicked. I tried to power it back on and it said it was dead. So it got completely drained all the way to zero. A couple minutes after that, William Bateman runs out of the death room saying that somebody grabbed him, and he's obviously panicked. And this was really, really weird to see because anybody that knows William Bateman knows he's like a daredevil. Like he's a really crazy guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like he did a lot of really wild stuff. It's not easy to shake that guy, and he was visibly like freaked out. So we asked him like, "Okay, what happened? What do you mean somebody touched you?" He was like, "I was asleep and I just felt like my leg drop. Like I was asleep and I woke up to my foot like hitting the couch, like almost like somebody picked up my foot and then just dropped it and it woke me up." And that freaked him out. Fast forward about 30 minutes, and Tate and Chris were saying that they had like a severe migraine. They felt really sick. Now, I don't know how, I'm not going to spin it as if this was something definitely paranormal,
Mm-hmm.
but they were very clearly affected. And once again, if you were to ask Chris in the retrospect, I asked him, he said that was probably the worst migraine he's had in his life. Um, so, if you're a ghost hunting purist, you could say, "Oh, it's affecting them." I don't know what it was, but in game, what ended up happening was I was really the only person left in the house because William had gone back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Tate and Chris were gone, and it was just me at that point.
Right.
Um, which is when in the timeline, I know I got into it a little bit earlier, but in the timeline, this was the last thing I ended up doing. I went to the room below the slaves' quarters with dowsing rods and began asking, who was messing with my phone, my flashlight, the
Mm-hmm.
whole nine. And you can watch, if you watch the YouTube video, I posted one documenting all of the evidence. Everything that I've said here tonight, you can see it with your own two eyeballs on the video. The majority of it was caught on camera.
Definitely, it will definitely be in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, the majority of it was caught on camera. And this was the last thing I ended up doing before going to bed. It was about 4 a.m. by that point, and I was using the dowsing rods. And I asked, who was that, you manipulating my flashlight? And I didn't get really a response. You could see the dowsing rods cross in response to my questions. But here's the thing, I really just don't trust dowsing rods at all. If any of you at home have played with dowsing rods, you know that they will move with even a breath too hard towards them. So I'm not.
So with breathing, yes. But I have used dowsing rods before, and the reason why I don't really use it in investigations for people to, like, I will never show evidence, you know what I mean, and say, oh, look, this is because unless you're holding it in your hand, you can't describe to somebody how it doesn't, you have to blow on it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like the dowsing rods, this is not where the evidence comes from. I was using
Yeah.
them, and I asked, "Was that you? Manipulating my flashlight? This, that, and the next." And there was banging, like you could hear it. I asked, "Is anybody here?" And you could hear creaking, almost like somebody was coming up the stairs. Like you could hear creaking, and that was weird, right? So I just continued asking questions. Right, it's 4 a.m. by that point. We're gonna leave soon. I'm like, all right, well, I gotta follow through. So it freaked me out. You can see me look over in the direction of the stairs. You can hear the creaking very well. And I ask another question, and you can hear banging, like in the room, like almost like literally somebody drop kicked the wall. Like it was a loud,
Holy
bang.
crap.
If you watch the video, I was like, "Ooh." And I looked over in the direction, and I was so delirious. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. I was so tired. I just kind of laughed at myself. I was like, oh, okay. And then I kept asking questions. I think there was one more bang, and then I was like, all right, I'm done with that. That's too fucking creepy for me. And I was out. So overall, like that was probably the most evidence-filled investigation I've had. And I think it was a combination of how haunted that location is and how new and fresh I was to everything. It just created like a uniquely terrifying experience for me. And like I said, it was like 7 different instances of just crazy activity. Like I don't even think I've covered all of it in this episode, which will probably be pretty long, but
Well, I mean, and that's the other thing too, is that people also get to watch your content, so they get to see that. So
yeah. Yeah.
and I also highly recommend that after you get done watching that, you continue to watch some of the stuff that William has put out, because it's pretty interesting. Like, not gonna lie. Um like the Skinwalker Railroad, the derail.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, I plan on remastering that video because there was like a corruption when I uploaded it, or like quality locked it. I'm gonna remaster that video in the Ferry Plantation house as kind of like a send off for Will Be, and I'll end up uploading those just because I think I really like the evidence in them. I don't think I showcased it in a way that I really wanted to. So yeah, that's something that'll happen eventually. But yeah, that's pretty much, yeah, right. That's pretty much all I can add. Like that was the majority of the experiences I can remember straight off the dome. That's
yeah.
a lot of like the interesting tidbits about the history, like with the burial ground and that tennis course. I swear down, like on God, like hand on a stack of Bibles, like all of that shit about Blackbeard going through there and the
Oh
fucking
man,
skeletons getting dug up at the tennis court and like everything, like that's all real shit.
I could believe that. Like I could definitely believe that. So,
Yeah.
back before I was a police officer, I was a over the road trucker, and there was a time when I was driving across like this long ass bridge across the Chesapeake Bay, and I remember it was like the sun was starting to set, and they had some sort of old, like, 1700s ship that was like something. It was probably a replica, but it had a big American flag on it and everything. And it was sailing off in the distance. Like I could just see the sails, and the flag was huge. And I got to thinking, I was like, there was a time when pirate ships were sailing this area. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah,
what?
Blackbeard he really rolled through there. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody loves pirates and stuff, but
Okay. Well, I've gone over the like tidbits of history that I can recall. I've gone through pretty much play by play the investigation itself and what I saw before the morning that I left. Retrospect stuff, like evidence that I may have not realized in the moment and I saw later. I don't think there's anything striking particularly. So that's pretty much everything from me.
there's one last question I'd have to ask of you then.
All right.
So, at some point, if I was able to, and I wanted to go investigate this for myself, would you be willing to go back?
Oh, of course. Like I said, I got asked on another podcast, so like, is there anywhere you wouldn't go? Because for me, like the Paris catacombs really freaked me out, and I was just like, no, no.
Yeah, no.
Uh,
No.
yeah, I mean, I just want to see activity. So yeah, the Ferry Plantation house, when I investigated initially, very scary location. But I also got some of the best evidence that I've captured in my whole ghost hunting, I guess, career you could call it. So yeah, I would absolutely go back.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to do that sometime. Podcast ever blows up and we make some money and
For sure.
who
For sure.
knows? But for right now, we'll just dream and talk about it. If we ever did do it, though, that would definitely be a special. That would be a like,
Yeah, I would love to see the difference between how I handled the investigation at that time and how I would handle it now. I definitely think that would be interesting.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I started investigating when I was 14, and if I could look back and I'll just be honest with you, I was ghost adventuring it. That was probably
Ghost, ghost.
that's what I thought of in paranormal investigating, and of course now, I mean, you've seen how I set up my cases.
Yeah, that's an interesting adjective
I'm
there.
like,
Ghost adventuring it.
yeah, I'm the way I do my paranormal investigations. I'm well,
Yeah,
it's
I saw
it's very
I
precise.
I saw this meme about the difference between ghost adventures and ghost hunters, like between Zach Bagans and Jason Hawes, and they said it was chest puffing versus chin rubbing.
Oh my god, yeah, yeah.
I don't think there's really a better way to put it.
I think if we ever did a visual show, though, we would just post whatever we did, regardless of if we caught evidence or not. Because a part of
Oh
the
yeah.
adventure, the part of the things that I love about paranormal investigations and just diving into this stuff anyway is just researching the folklore and learning the history. And I mean, even if the Ferry Plantation house isn't haunted, it's a really
Oh
cool place.
yeah, like I mean, the history of it is crazy. Like if you just go to the Fair Plantation House website and read what they have about the history on there, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But actually going on the tour and like hearing the extra little insights on things and like getting to see the slave tags they kept and all the stuff like that was super interesting is like 10 times crazier to me.
Yeah. No. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and just, you know, start wrapping it up. I mean, this was a pretty interesting case, like I said, especially because of all the history. And yeah,
Right.
definitely in the future we gotta get together and
Yeah,
investigate that place. So
definitely. It's cool covering, a location on the show that I have a little bit of insight into. I definitely think that's pretty cool.
yeah, and listeners, your homework, besides leaving a comment and telling us how we're doing, your homework is you got to watch this video. You got to watch it. Like,
You won't regret it, I swear. I just turned 16. Me and my team might have been a little bit insufferable, but that evidence, man, that's something different for real.
yeah, and yeah, and definitely check out other other postings that he did, because that William has done, because it's all good stuff, and it's kind of cool that you documented kind of the beginning. So
Of course, it'll always stay up. All of my videos, even the terrible ones from the very beginning. Like, when I first started WTCW, my little niche I wanted to do was messing with like the game rituals that people do at like sleepovers, like the cat scratch game, like red door, yellow door, Bloody Mary, like all those like little things that people do, and that was like my niche for a while. So even those videos that were like terrible, they're always going to be up on page.
you're gonna find this stupid, but and I know it's just bullshit, but like I won't do the Bloody Mary thing. I won't,
You're scared of doing Bloody Mary?
because what if? What if? What if?
I did it. I was fine.
Like, just what if? And
It didn't work for me, man.
and is that the moment? I mean, and I
Oh, you
tend to come home and like, you know, I don't immediately just like take off the gun belt and everything. And I mean, normally I just kind of like walk in. I got a big mirror in my house, and so, you know, I'm not saying I'm paranoid. I kind of clear the house, not with I'm practicing. You know what I mean? I'm practicing. I live
you're
alone,
you're
so I'm
practicing for when
practicing.
you have an intruder.
So I'm practicing all my, my SWAT techniques, and um I don't need to come around the corner and see Bloody Mary looking at me in the mirror, and then I have to explain to my landlord why I put 4 rounds into the wall. I'm not doing that.
You don't need to explain to the landlord because they'll come to the house to inspect what the noise was last night, and Bloody Mary will just take them away.
It's like,
Bloody Mary
I,
deal with them.
I'm sorry, you don't understand ghosts. That's
You
why
don't. You don't.
I
Just
fired.
practicing. I mean, I would probably do this if I was a cop. I mean, you've probably seen some shit, man. I'd be nervous to just pull up to my crib without inspection. I'd probably take a double check of the corners too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's just keep your skills up, I guess. But um, yeah, I just no. Well, because not only that, so our rounds are very particular, right? So like even if we go to the range, we have to empty out our duty rounds and put in training rounds, because our duty rounds are meant for actual service. So they may never get fired at all. But anyway, point is, then I have to go back and explain to my captain why I fired duty rounds in my house.
You just call me. I'll explain to him everything. I'll prove that ghosts are real to him. He'll be like, oh,
I'm
okay,
like,
this all makes sense.
you don't understand. It's because of Casper.
It's because of ghosts.
It's because of
No.
Casper. Anyway, so I think it's time to go ahead and close the gates on this one and lock up the crypt yard, and just, stick around for the trailer for our next case. So if you stick around, it'll be literally right after we finish here. So be sure to check us out on social media. It's very easy to find us. Just check out our link tree in the show notes. And guys, again, and this is the last time I'll say it tonight, I promise. Also, be sure to check out William's adventures with WTCW Paranormal. That's also in the show notes. So,
That's right. Check out WTCW, or you might wake up and Bloody Mary's going to be in your mirror, So you didn't hear it from me.
all right, guys. See you guys next time.
Next time on Crypt Walkers.
Our next case takes us to the foggy streets of Chicago, where there's a legend that still lingers on to this day, a ghostly tale that chills to the bone. Some say she just waits by the side of the road, a pale figure in a flowing white dress, her eyes hollow with sorrow. Others say she's something different. Everyone calls her Resurrection Mary. See, no one really knows her name, but many have claimed to have seen her. Young woman hitchhiking on Archer Avenue, desperate for a ride. Of course, only to vanish without a trace. Our next case, Resurrection Mary, premieres Wednesday, December 4th, 2024, wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you ready to walk amongst the crypts with us? Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform and never miss an episode. Don't forget to leave a review and share your own paranormal stories with us. We might feature them in an upcoming episode of Crypt Walkers, the Listener Files. Check us out on social media by clicking the link tree in the show notes. If you want to send in your own case or spooky story, email us at contact@cryptwalkers.net. Also, be sure to check out William's adventures with WTCW Paranormal by clicking his link tree in the show notes.
This podcast is a Miko Line Media production. The names Crypt Walkers, a Paranormal Podcast, and WTCW Paranormal is owned by its individual owners, all rights reserved. Music by Quentin Colbitz and Max H. Music and sound design created by Miko Line Media and licensed through Artlist. Copyright 2024.